with that, Jane, I'm going to turn this over to you to kick us off. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, George, and thanks, Matt, for having me. So I'm Jane Clements-Smith, Executive Director of Feeding Pennsylvania, and we are the State Association of Feeding America Food Banks. So we represent the 9 major Feeding America food banks covering all 67 counties, as you can see there on the map. Our food banks serve as large major distribution warehouses that distribute food through a network of about 2,700 different agencies. That's like your food pantries, your soup kitchens, and shelters. And typically before COVID-19, we distributed 160 million pounds of food annually to about the 1.5 million Pennsylvanians who are struggling with hunger. However, since COVID-19 became apparent in Pennsylvania, we've seen a major increase in need coming to our food pantries, and that's apparent from the 1.4 million people who have applied for unemployment since mid-March. And to put that into perspective, March of 2019, 100,000 people applied for unemployment. So we are seeing astronomical amount of people applying. So we quickly, as Feeding Pennsylvania, joined a statewide task force with agencies from the Wolf administration. And then we've also been working with our Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture to work with the federal government on USDA commodities. So in changing the way we do business, we've had to look at how we can follow the CDC guidelines for social distancing and also keeping the products that we serve to the people in our community safe. So we started shifting the way we distribute food by, for example, boxing some of these commodities, and you'll hear a little bit from one of my members, Joe Arthur in Central Pennsylvania, about how they're doing that. And then we've also started doing drive-through distribution. So people will drive through, pop their trunk, we'll drop the box of food in, it'll last them a few days, and we're doing those all around Pennsylvania. Food access, I would say, is our #1 issue right now. We are having a harder time finding family-sized packages of food. Every time people do this panic buying at the grocery stores, it is clogging up the system when it comes to food, not even just donations. We're trying to purchase the food. Shippers and manufacturers are scrambling, trying to meet the needs of retailers. And that means ultimately the orders we have in, millions of dollars of orders, are getting kicked to the end of the line. So we are continuing to, thanks to many of the businesses that are in the energy industry and all different kinds of industries, we're continuing to take those donations because we're also seeing an uptick in the price of food. And we're continuing to try to reevaluate the way we serve the people that we already have been serving for many, many years, but also this new group of people that may be out of work for an uncertain amount of time. And we're doing that, like I said, through this network of food banks. And Joe and Jean will be next to tell you a little bit more about what they're seeing on the ground floor. So I'll yield to Joe now.
Hey, thank you, Jane. And just very quickly want to thank George and the Cabot team for allowing us to be on this platform. This is very helpful. Jane had alluded there to the support that we're asking for from our companies, from people in general, from foundations. Very necessary because most of the food that we're providing in even more abundance now than ever, we need to pay for, and it's a constricted food supply, as Jane mentioned, particularly for shelf-stable goods. So I'll take a little deeper dive on what it looks like on the ground. So you can see on the map on the screen, Central Pennsylvania Food Bank serves pretty much the whole Susquehanna Valley and a little bit more. And of the millions of pounds that Jane described that the Feeding Pennsylvania member food banks provide, Central Pennsylvania, by virtue of its geography, provides about half of that poundage. So generally about 60 million pounds of food. The last month, we just checked our numbers as of yesterday, which was the 15th of April. Our poundage is actually up by 50%, actually a little bit more than that. So that's a couple million extra pounds for us, but 50% is a huge increase with pretty constricted supply lines. So how we do that, we have a partner agency network, like all Feeding America food banks. in feeding Pennsylvania food banks. And about 65% of our partners on the ground, think of pantries and soup kitchens and shelters, are operational right now. So we actually feel pretty good about that because they're all volunteer based. And in the COVID-19 world, they had to greatly change their protocol, just as we have back at the regional food bank. The recent governor orders around masks and social distancing and stay at home, we are impacted by all of that. So we need to do that here at our hubs. I'm in my office at the hub, which is actually more of a command center right now with the limited staff. We're not packing any boxes here. In order to do this right on the scale that we need to do it, we have 170,000 square feet, and Jane had mentioned we're working with state agencies. That's how we've obtained that. FEMA is paying for the space, and that allows us to spread out with packing lines with volunteers and do all of the protocol, all of the spacing we need, all of the sanitizing and cleaning, and everything that we do. To give you a close look at that, even when our teams take a break, they have to sit on chairs that are at least 6 feet apart, facing the same direction. When they pack, they're facing the same direction, and on and on. So the protocol is pretty tight. It's actually very tight for us. And we've learned how to operate that way very well. And we've taught our partners how to do that as well. So we are up to speed on all of that. I will take a note real quickly to kind of dive in with the school aspect. George had mentioned that his spouse is a teacher. So they're out of school right now, and you have all the challenges at home, and I see George smiling. But the challenges in the communities and at the schools, what about the children that are on free and reduced lunch that need those meals? So that's actually happening at our school districts. And how we're walking alongside of them is if the child is food insecure, so is the family. So we're providing the crisis response boxes that Jane described to our school districts, and volunteers that are actually bringing those boxes to the parking lots for the schools, and providing trunk service, basically providing those boxes to the family, no touch, to help them through these difficult times. So we're really proud of what the Pennsylvania school, the whole school apparatus is doing. And really, we believe that Pennsylvania as a whole is doing amazing work. I personally am on a national council for Feeding America, and not all states have been as proactive and responsive as ours. So I want to give a shout out to the Wolf administration and really to our whole General Assembly for the amazing and quick work they've been doing, getting the national leadership to provide what Pennsylvania needs to be able to do a robust response. And we're leveraging that as we go. So I'll leave the remainder for Q&A. Again, challenging times, but just know that the Feeding Pennsylvania food banks and our food bank are there for people. And all of our information that you see on the screen is available to the general public. And our helplines are very, very busy and growing by the day. So we're proud of our work, but letting folks know that we're there to help them. So I'll turn it over to Gene at CEO Weinberg Food Bank.
Thank you, and thank you to Cabot. Thanks to George Stark and all the people at Cabot who have been great partners. They're wonderful corporate citizens in Pennsylvania, and again, stepping up during what is an unprecedented situation that we're all experiencing. Many of the things that both Jane and Joe talked about, because we are a regional food bank, we do as well. I wanted to focus on if in our area that we serve Susquehanna, Wyoming, Lackawanna, and Luzerne County, and you would see up on the screen our website. For people in our communities, and this would be similar to any food bank, they can go to that website and they can do a number of things. They can first, if they're in need, they can go and find the closest food pantry to them. It's GPS based, and that way they can get out and get food if that's needed. Secondly, they can volunteer. Once again, go to the website. They'll see a button to click to volunteer, which would entail helping us to do packing and so many of the things that we have to do. These the safe distancing kind of distributions we're doing and such all take and the wonderful efforts of people in Pennsylvania. And finally, for people interested in donating, they can go to the site and make a donation to help with this effort. So we've been very busy, and we continue to do that. I would also say, when it comes to food, that people should be aware they can also apply online at www.compass.state.pa.us for the SNAP benefits program that would be available. But for many of the citizens that we're dealing with, we're seeing people for the first time that are unemployed, waiting for a paycheck, waiting for the assistance they're going to get for the federal government, and they've never gone through this before. So this informational session, I think it's wonderful for people, hopefully, to find out how they can get help and how we're working together to get through this with all the food banks in Pennsylvania and with a lot of organizations that are there to guide people during these times. So I want to say that we have member organizations. We too work with school districts. We work with all of our member organizations. A regional food bank is a building that distributes out to people in the community, or I'm sorry, organizations in the community. People don't come to that regional food bank. So we ship food to people. One of the latest things that we're doing through the American Dairy Association, who is giving us free milk, is we've started a process to give that milk. They're bringing tractor trailer loads that have about 10,000 half gallons of milk, and we're redistributing that to throughout our service territory. Just another way of trying to help people in need. So I would encourage people to get involved, and if you need help, to certainly reach out and to help. And I would also again thank Cabot for their putting this information session on to help so many people.
But how do we make certain that we're placing the farmers in conjunction with the food banks? Can you tell us or educate us about how that linkage occurs so that there's not food going to waste? So maybe Jane, I'll start with you, or whoever wishes to answer.
Sure. I think that one of the things that we have, and Joe is involved and Jane with this, is the fact that we have involvement with a PASS program in Pennsylvania, that we do directly work with farmers. We have relationships with those farmers. It exists in every county in Pennsylvania, and we're looking to do more and more. Some of our donors are farmers, and right now there's farmers that have specialty items that they typically give to restaurants that they're looking for a place to go. It's why we're working with the milk industry and taking their product to make sure it doesn't go to waste, but it goes out to people. So we are trying to put things in place. We do have a history of doing that. And I would say that we're going to continue with that effort and work very strongly to make sure that that essential industry of farmers continues to thrive, and do all that we can to work closely with them during what is a difficult time for them as well.
And if I could add to that, so Gene talked about the Pennsylvania Ag Surplus System, or PASS, which is a state-funded program. And we also work with the federal government on the Emergency Food Assistance Program that works with agriculture. And we think there are going to be additional buys, specifically in the dairy industry, coming up to support fresh milk, butter, cheese, egg, or cheese and yogurt. So we're definitely working with the federal government to tell them, like, we want these products, we need your support, and working with those ag partners as well. We also have, under Feeding Pennsylvania, a produce cooperative that works with Pennsylvania growers. And during this COVID-19 crisis, we've moved to taking the produce that would typically go to a large distribution, and we've created 50-pound boxes of produce that a family can take home. And we particularly have, it's not the growing season in Pennsylvania, but we already have one of our main potato growers donating into that process, but we also have money that we go out and make sure that they know that we're a secondary buyer. And to Jean's point, there are wholesalers in Pennsylvania whose main business has been the restaurant industry, and we've been working with them to take their surplus product and get it out to families in need. So there is a big, robust move to make sure that agriculture is number one with what we do.
Yeah, George, I might also add at a national level, so Feeding Pennsylvania and the member food banks are also part of the Feeding America National Network, which I'm on a national council. And this is actually a national effort too, with the USDA and all of the 200 food banks across the country, trying to do exactly what Jane and Jean described. So it's actually a monumental effort involving hundreds of millions of dollars to try to acquire that product and either process it or to get it directly to the food banks. Our biggest challenge is the scale of the industries that have been shut down, like restaurants, like schools. As big as our charitable food network is nationally and here in Pennsylvania, we are small relative to the scale of those industries that are not using those food products. So we are trying our very best, but just know the scale of that is immense.
I appreciate those insights, Joe. And, we heard from Josh about the idea of, notifying your legislators if you see needs. And I'll come to you, Jane. There's a question here regarding, how could people in a call to action assist you and a state level or a national level with what's going on in Congress? Are there pieces that you could point us to? We're sort of familiar with the CARES or PPP, but are there pieces that are food bank, food insecurity related that could help, that we could help as a block to help you advance?
We do work with our Feeding America nationally. They have a legislative branch. We have worked closely with Secretary Perdue and the Agricultural Department. Early on, we were out there getting waivers so that we could, some of the paperwork that had to be done with individuals was waived so that social distancing could be avoided and we could safely give food to individuals in Pennsylvania. And of course, supporting efforts to try to get the food from the farms. It's always been out there farm to table. It's now, because of this emergency, shifting to farm to people. So we're working to have those kind of things put in place.
It's the idea that what you were doing prior to COVID-19 was important work from a food insecurity, but to hear about a need quadrupling, the idea that, again, from an individual basis, it's not hard to help, but from company standpoint and the like, the real call to action here is look for that opportunity to be of assistance. But when you look long term, I'm imagining for you or for Joe, I hate to even say the words, but you see this for potentially months down the line. This isn't going to end when the curve gets flattened. This is going to persist for quite some time. Am I correct in that, sir?
I don't think there's any question about it. It would appear the next phase of this, and we're anxious to get into the next phase, is going to be people when they start getting, their life starts getting back to normal, probably with social distancing and such, so living in a little bit of a different way. But what is going to be the case, if you think about this, if they've missed their paychecks for months for families, and they live paycheck to paycheck for so many of those, we're seeing those people for the first time, and their problems are not going to be over. They're going to have to make sure that their rent is paid, make sure their utilities are paid, and their other essentials that they have in life. And a lot of times the last thing that comes out of the budget they don't have the wherewithal to take care of is food. So I think we're unfortunately we're projecting that we're going to see this in a continued way, and that we're going to have to keep up our efforts to make sure that we have proper nutrition and getting that food out to families. And I know Joe would have a lot to say on this as well.
Yeah, I mean, everything that Gene said applies here and across the state, across the country. And I think what we're all working on, George, I mean, our crystal ball is as cloudy as everybody else, but we know that going to be measuring this in months, perhaps in terms of elevated need, as we're all seeing the unemployment figures come out and so on and so forth. And I think the area of emerging needs, we're all watching right now for kind of hotspots. But as we move forward, certain industries are known to be impacted, but there's other industries that are also being impacted, and they have a concentration in certain areas. So both the Weinberg Food Bank and our food bank are on a key transportation corridor with a lot of warehousing and distribution. And we're not quite sure all of that will come back strong very quickly. It'll all depend on how the general economy does and how the consumer bears up months down the road. So just an example of a type of industry that hasn't received a lot of news, but that we think is going to be greatly impacted. And it's only one industry of many. So I agree with Gene. That's our national view as well. This is going to be a long recovery that has a high level of food insecurity alongside of it.
George, if I could just jump in really quickly, I've told people a couple of times this. My husband works in produce industry and unfortunately had several cases of COVID-19 a week and a half ago. And so my daughters and I had to move out of our house and move in with friends. We've been 2 weeks tomorrow out of our house. And these friends who were really nice to take us in, though, the husband owns a gym and the wife is a hairstylist, and overnight they lost all of their income. And so I think the one thing is that people like them don't necessarily think like, oh, now I'm going to go to a food bank. They're going to take the pay they have some savings. But, you know, it was within this week that they looked at us and said to me, like, we don't have savings forever. Like, how much longer does this go on? So, you know, we're seeing an uptick as the paycheck to paycheck people like Gene talked about, but this isn't even just paycheck to paycheck people. I mean, at some point, like we said, this could be a year or two, and some of these people who don't want to be going to a food bank and don't want to be signing up for food stamps, but at some point you've got to make ends meet, and they still have their mortgage and they still have their car payments, and these people are paying $800 a month for health insurance. I mean, the bills are still rolling in. So I think what we're providing, everybody on this call is providing, is going to become more and more serious as the months roll on.